Hello, everybody. I grab information from it, then simplified it, and guess what? I use artificial intelligence. Here we go.
Your nickname, don't tell me, was the Explosion.
The Halifax Explosion, named after the single greatest man-made explosion before Hiroshima. It was 1917, ship laden with dynamite, crashed into another ship in Halifax Harbour. Tremendous explosion and loss of life. Burned people's eyes out with the blast. Many were blinded by the light, like the song says. And a First Nations tribe was lost.
The Great Halifax Explosion. The most devastating explosion. On the morning of December 6, 1917, the French cargo ship SS Mont Blanc collided with the Norwegian vessel SS Imo in the waters of Halifax, Nova Scotia, Canada. The Mont Blanc, laden with high explosives, caught fire and exploded, devastating the Richmond district of Halifax. The blast was the largest human-made explosion at the time, releasing the equivalent energy of roughly 2.9 kilotons of TNT. Mont Blanc was under orders from the French government to carry her cargo from New York City via Halifax to Bordeaux, France. At roughly 8:45 a.m., she collided at low speed, approximately 1 knot, with the unladen Imo, chartered by the Commission for Relief in Belgium to pick up a cargo of relief supplies in New York. On the Mont Blanc, the impact damaged benzol barrels stored on deck, leaking vapors which were ignited by sparks from the collision, setting off a fire on board that quickly grew out of control. Approximately 20 minutes later at 9:04 and 35 seconds a.m., the Mont Blanc exploded. The disaster. The Norwegian ship SS Imo had sailed from the Netherlands en route to New York to take on relief supplies for Belgium, under the command of Håkon. The ship arrived in Halifax on December 3 for neutral inspection and spent 2 days in Bedford Basin awaiting refueling supplies. Though she had been given clearance to leave the port on December 5, Imo's departure was delayed because her coal load did not arrive until late that afternoon. The loading of fuel was not completed until after the anti-submarine nets had been raised for the night. Therefore, the vessel could not depart until the next morning. The French cargo ship SS Mont Blanc arrived from New York late on December 5, under the command of Amlou Medic. The vessel was fully loaded with the explosives TNT and picric acid, the highly flammable fuel benzol, and gun cotton. She intended to join a slow convoy gathering in Bedford Basin readying to depart for Europe, but was too late to enter the harbor before the nets were raised. Ships carrying dangerous cargo were not allowed into the harbor before the war, but the risks posed by German submarines resulted in a relaxation of regulations. Collision and fire. Imo was granted clearance to leave Bedford Basin by signals from the guard ship HMCS Acadia at approximately 7:30 on the morning of December 6, with pilot William Hayes on board. The ship entered the Narrows well above the harbor's speed limit in an attempt to make up for the delay experienced in loading her coal. Imo met an American tramp steamer SS Clara being piloted up the wrong, western, side of the harbor. Francis Mackey, an experienced harbor pilot, had boarded Mont Blanc on the evening of December 5, 1917. He had asked about special protections such as a guard ship, given the Mont Blanc's cargo, but no protections were put in place. Mont Blanc started moving at 7:30 a.m. on December 6 and was the second ship to enter the harbor as the anti-submarine net between George Island and Pier 21 opened for the morning. Mont Blanc headed towards Bedford Basin on the Dartmouth side of the harbor. Mackey gave a short blast of his ship's signal whistle to indicate that he had the right-of-way but was met with 2 short blasts from Imo, indicating that the approaching vessel would not yield its position. The captain ordered Mont Blanc to halt her engines and angle slightly to starboard, closer to the Dartmouth side of the Narrows. He let out another single blast of his whistle, hoping the other vessel would likewise move to starboard, but was again met with a double blast. Sailors on nearby ships heard the series of signals and, realizing that a collision was imminent, gathered to watch as Imo bore down on Mont Blanc. Both ships had cut their engines by this point, but their momentum carried them toward each other at a slow speed. Unable to ground his ship for fear of a shock that would set off his explosive cargo, Mackey ordered Mont Blanc to steer hard to port, starboard helm, and crossed the bow of IMO in a last-second bid to avoid a collision. The two ships were almost parallel to each other when IMO suddenly sent out 3 signal blasts, indicating the ship was reversing its engines. The combination of the cargo-less ship's height in the water and the transverse thrust of her right-hand propeller caused the ship's head to swing into Mont Blanc. IMO's prow pushed into the No. 1 hold of Mont Blanc on her starboard side.
Coleman remembered that an incoming passenger train from St. John, New Brunswick was due to arrive at the rail yard within minutes. He returned to his post alone and continued to send out urgent telegraph messages to stop the train. Several variations of the message have been reported, among them this from the Maritime Museum of the Atlantic: "Hold up the train. Ammunition ships afire in harbor making it for Pier 6 and will explode. Guess this will be my last message. Goodbye, boys." Coleman's message was responsible for bringing all incoming trains around Halifax to a halt. It was heard by other stations all along the Intercolonial Railway, helping railway officials to respond immediately. Destruction. The exact number killed in the disaster is unknown. The Halifax Explosion Remembrance Book, an official database of the Nova Scotia Archives and Records Management, identified 1,782 victims. As many as 1,600 people died immediately in the blast, tsunami, and collapse of buildings. The last body, a caretaker killed at the exhibition grounds, was not recovered until the summer of 1919. An additional 9,000 were injured. 1,630 homes were destroyed in the explosion and fires, and another 12,000 were damaged. Roughly 6,000 people were left homeless and 25,000 had insufficient shelter. The city's industrial sector was in large part gone, with many workers among the casualties and the dockyard heavily damaged. Many of the wounds inflicted by the blast were permanently debilitating, such as those caused by flying glass or by the flash of the explosion. Thousands of people had stopped to watch the ship burning in the harbor, many from inside buildings, leaving them directly in the path of glass fragments from shattered windows. Roughly 5,900 eye injuries were reported, and 41 people lost their sight permanently. An extensive comparison of 130 major explosions by Halifax historian J. White in 1994 concluded that it remains unchallenged in overall magnitude as long as 5 criteria are considered together: number of casualties, force of blast, radius of devastation, quantity of explosive material, and total value of property destroyed. For many years afterward, the Halifax explosion was the standard by which all large blasts were measured. For instance, in its report on the atomic bombing of Hiroshima, Time wrote that the explosive power of the Little Boy bomb was 7 times that of the Halifax explosion. The many eye injuries resulting from the disaster led to a better understanding of how to care for damaged eyes, and with the recently formed Canadian National Institute for the Blind, Halifax became internationally known as a Centre for Care for the Blind. According to Dalhousie University professor Victoria Allen, the lack of coordinated pediatric care in such a disaster was also noted by William Ladd, a surgeon from Boston who had arrived to help. His insights from the explosion are generally credited with inspiring him to pioneer the specialty of pediatric surgery in North America. The Halifax explosion also inspired a series of health reforms, including around public sanitation and maternity care. In 1918, Halifax sent a Christmas tree to the city of Boston in thanks and remembrance for the help that the Boston Red Cross and the Massachusetts Public Safety Committee provided immediately after the disaster. That gift was revived in 1971 by the Lunenburg County Christmas Tree Producers Association, which began an annual donation of a large tree to promote Christmas tree exports as well as acknowledge Boston's support after the explosion. The gift was later taken over by the Nova Scotia government to continue the goodwill gesture as well as to promote trade and tourism.